Welcome back to episode number 12 on the wealth of self. Kayona Ebony Brown joins me in the studio today to discuss her journey to becoming an Emmy award-winning writer. Yes, you heard that correctly. Growing up as an only child to a single mom in DC, Kayona wasn't raised to be a stereotypical girl. Her mom allowed her to be a child first and foremost, and let her curiosity, creativity, and explorative nature guide her growth. This nonlinear rearing method provided Kayona with the flexibility to engage with a variety of subjects that she found to be interesting. But she often references her early interest in sports as a foundational element to the work she does now on many major sports-related pieces of content. It wasn't until Kayona identified her own ability to control her perceptions and her reality that she began to truly flourish within the creative space. This allowed her to navigate away from the very dark roads and past failures so that she was no longer operating from a place of fear, but rather a place of confidence and control. She distinctly remembers reading Neil Donald Walsh's book, Conversations with God, which changed her life and her outlook on what was possible for her future. She read this at the beginning of the global pandemic, and this uncertain period of time made her ask, why not? And was a catalyst for her to begin networking with other creative professionals more seriously than she had in the past. Her embodiment of the phrase, "You'll see it when you believe it," reinforces her narrative about controlling her own reality and is a guiding force in the routines and methodologies she employs in order to find success with her creative processes. Her writing has opened the doors to working with some of the world's most high-caliber talent, such as Viola Davis, on some of the biggest stages, aka the Super Bowl. It's an incredible honor to know and to have worked with Kayona inside the creative space, and her career trajectory is scaling at an impressive rate, which is to be expected when you're as talented as she is. I'm glad you're along for the ride, so let's jump into this episode with Kayona Ebony Brown. Welcome back from our intro. This is episode number 12 on the wealth of self, and I'm excited now because I've got somebody I look up to a lot in the studio.
Really?
Yeah, hell yeah. This is Kayona Brown, a creative
Ebony.
mastermind. Yes, Kayona Ebony Brown, and this is someone who I've had the chance to work with you on a couple of occasions on a really amazing project that I hope we'll talk about here in a little bit, but. I just say I admire your creative journey so much, and more recently I've really looked to you for advice on how you approach the creative process and how you've been able to make a name for yourself in this space as you continue to grow. But I wanted to turn it over to you for your own introduction, and we'll kind of jump in here and paint this picture for the viewers and the listeners out there. But thanks for coming in.
I appreciate that. And I
Absolutely.
didn't know you admired me, so that makes me feel...
Oh my gosh, you have no idea. You have no idea.
I'm a storyteller, so that can be categorized across the board. I mean, really much of it. But I mostly write screenplays, and I do write some prose, so I have like a few books and things like that.
Yeah.
I lean on the screenplay a lot. I do about 50%. I jokingly say I do 50% features, 50% TV, and 50% unscripted.
Get that
so
extra,
you got 350s,
that
right?
overtime in there.
Yeah, but what that means is there's another world of storytelling that is considered unscripted, because you don't technically write the script going into it. You don't write it afterward either, but you don't structure it in that way. You kind of know, at least for me, I know the story going into it,
right?
And I write sort of the script afterward based on the transcript of whoever I'm speaking to. And that's, I'm saying a lot of words, but that's essentially documentaries, docuseries, those kinds of things that fall into that alternative space of storytelling.
Right.
And funny enough that I've been doing narrative or scripted stories for literally my entire life.
Yeah. You said all the way back to before you were even writing or reading, really. That was creative brain,
Yeah. I mean, it's like, my mom used to read stories to me when I was like a baby. And
yeah, same.
The thing for me is like, because, we'll talk about this a little bit more in how she, allowed me to kind of be an explorer.
Yes.
But I would hear things like Little Red Riding Hood. I'm like, I could do that.
Yeah.
I remember being like in third grade and the teacher would read Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
And that was my thing, like those scary stories. But in my mind, I was like, I could do that.
Yeah.
Like you can tell me I had so much confidence in my artistic ability as a child. I was like, anything that I saw, I was like, I could do that.
Yeah.
So with the storytelling, that goes way back. And I was always writing stories about any and everything because I felt like I could do that. And so now it manifests itself in so many different forms and formats, but primarily in the film and TV arena and the unscripted world of storytelling in that space. So I absolutely love it. In some of these ways, the unscripted stuff has been primarily sports and sports related, which again, as a kid, sports was my thing because I could do that.
Yeah.
But so the stories have come from there, but most of the accolades and success and things like that have come from the sports world. And
right.
It's I embrace it, but I did not anticipate that. That wasn't on the vision board. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, and you've had the opportunity, to work on some incredible stuff that's been highly visible, and people might not know that, but we'll get into it. And for those who are watching or listening, go check it out because there are some awesome pieces. But one of the things I've always appreciated about you since getting to know you more is that you've always got a creative story or an idea that is in the works, and that just sort of comes out even in just normal conversation on the drive over. We were talking about a piece that you're working on right now, and it's just like, I think that whenever you're seriously passionate about a subject, it's every day. It's just the way you live. And I think that you have embodied that as you've developed into this amazing writer that you are now. But for the viewing audience, I always try to do this for them, but taking them back, painting that picture of how you got started and sort of that early life journey and how it informed those next steps. So you're a DC girl, right?
Yep.
Born and raised.
Right here.
Let's paint that picture for the viewers and the listeners.
It's so funny because when we spoke briefly about this, I was like, I have an odd way of remembering things where I remember that something happened.
Yeah.
But as far
more
as
factual, right?
Like I remember that I grew up on this street, but can I remember any stories that happened on that street? Probably not. Oddly, I don't remember the stories, right?
Yeah.
So I remember that, we spoke a lot about my mom because I live with her still today. It's so funny, but her story, her influence on me and how she raised me comes up a lot now when I'm having a lot of meetings, because I've been having a lot of meetings with people within my business,
right?
And how it contributes to who I am in the stories, because I feel like she was ahead of her time.
Yeah.
Like we have a lot of language and conversations now, and people are misusing the word woke, for some reason. I'm not going to go down that road, but I don't think they know what they're talking about. They don't even know how to define the word. They just like to use it and throw it around.
Right.
But she didn't really raise, look, for instance, when she was pregnant, she didn't go and she would have probably scoffed at a gender reveal. She's like, what the hell is a gender reveal? She didn't go and figure out or try to figure out what gender her kid was.
It wasn't hashtag trending at that time, right?
She didn't care about that. It was like, I'm having a kid. I hope it's a healthy kid, right?
Right, exactly.
So she just painted the room yellow.
Yeah.
I know I'm having a kid. I'm going to paint the room yellow.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. It wasn't blue or pink, because even if you have a boy, who's to say he doesn't like pink?
Exactly.
If you have a girl, I like blue.
How are you going to know?
So, she didn't do all of that.
Right.
So she painted the room yellow. She has a little baby girl. So,
and does that have any roots to your own color palette that you use professionally? Because Kayona Ebony Brown, you've got a yellow sort of color palette for a lot of what you do.
Really? I didn't know that. No, I'm just kidding. No, I don't think so. I try to usually
gotcha.
base that kind of stuff with respect to whatever the story is.
Yeah,
those golden embers and things like that. We try to emphasize. Yeah. But that's usually more specific to with regard to whatever the story is.
Right. Yeah.
But maybe unconsciously. I don't know. I never really truly thought about it that way.
Right.
But in thinking back like that, okay, she has this kid, and so that's all she cared about.
Right.
I've got a healthy kid. And so she allowed me to be a child. We even hear today, even still today, you have people talking about what girls are supposed to do and what boys are supposed to do.
Yeah.
Fighting other genders.
Traditional social norms.
Exactly. And just resisting and fighting that there could possibly be, like, we've evolved as humans, and I won't go down that whole thing, but this human evolution is constant.
Yep.
So we're fighting, that there could possibly be some other genders, available out there. These people must be that whole thing. But she was able to allow me to be a child.
Right.
So if I went into a toy store and I saw a football, that's what I want. I want a football.
Yeah.
I got a football.
Yeah.
If I went in there and I saw a little doll or, and I wanted to do that, I had a little cousin, a girl cousin who always played with dolls. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool that she's doing her hair like that. That was my thought.
Yeah.
I really like what she's doing with her easy bake oven type of thing. So I ate the cookies. I won't lie, but I didn't have an easy bake oven.
Yeah.
But, the point is, I had toys that were for girls and I had toys that were for boys. I played sports. I was very much into music.
Yeah.
And not a singer or songwriter, but I was a DJ. Like, I asked for vinyl records because I wanted to start my vinyl collection, things like that. And so it was like she went out and got a few little record player, got a couple of vinyl pieces. Yeah. Because I wanted to be a real DJ,
Yeah.
So it was just like, I was an only child. So it was probably spoiled, not rotten, I had respect and stuff, but I wasn't rotten, but definitely I was spoiled. I will admit to that.
Yeah.
But I think that it did contribute to me being an explorer,
right?
Like me being a kid who always asked questions.
Yeah.
And if she didn't have the answer, which she'll admit, most of the time she didn't have the answers to the questions I was asking.
I think most parents don't, actually. Yeah.
But it wasn't like, either trying to A, make up an answer, B, giving me some wrong answer that they knew from something someone else told them.
Right.
She always went with C, which was, let's just go figure this thing out. Let me go get a book from the library, or let me just, go somewhere and ask someone else who might have the answer.
Start
to
asking
that question.
questions, right?
Right. And I think that really contributed to the storytelling, because it's like once you figure out the answer, like, how did the Earth start? And well, maybe there was like this big bang. Oh, it's a big bang.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So then I'm writing stories. Most of my stories have some space elements. So it was, I had telescopes and all that because I needed, like, that was my thing.
Yeah.
Science and things like that. So it was just always, if this is what the kid is interested in, let the kid be a kid, ask questions. Let's just nurture it and see where it goes. I'm not a scientist. I sucked at science when I was in school. But before I got to that advanced level, I was looking at stars all the time. I was playing with chemistry sets. That was my thing. I had train sets. Those were my thing.
Those are some of the best toys, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Some of the best.
That's what I like to do. And I think that all of that contributed to storytelling, like being this explorer.
Yeah.
And you're always communicating with people and communicating with your experiences in a certain way that maybe other people don't, or maybe other people take for granted, or you just don't pay it any attention. Everything meant something to me.
Right.
And even if I don't remember the exact storyline to playing with a train set or something like that, transportation plays. If you come in my house, I have little model cars everywhere.
Yeah.
And again, that looks like something you walk into, and that's what? A boy's house.
A boy's toy, right? Yeah.
Right. But no, I love classic cars.
Yeah.
I have that conversation with my uncle.
Yeah.
So many little things. I can have these various conversations with people. We're always talking about this 65 Chevy he's working on. We always talk about that. So it's just, it's always having these experiences where you can have these various conversations with people and connect with people. And when you connect with people, that leads to them opening up. And when they open up, they're telling you what? Their story, right?
Yep.
And so you're getting fodder for your next screenplay.
Right, exactly.
Your next book.
It's inspiration around every corner.
Exactly.
Right? But I think that sort of varied upbringing and having all these different influences very much was an informative force for what you do now. When you're pigeonholing yourself into one route, it can kind of create a linear mind and a linear mindset. But to know that you had all these influences from all different directions, I mean, what better upbringing to create someone who is a writer? essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's funny because I didn't necessarily, I don't think any kid knows exactly what they're going to do.
Right.
The parents may say, she's messing with those words a little too often. She's probably going to end up writing something when she gets older. I think I talked a lot. I think my grandparents probably thought I would be someone who was a public speaker, and I'm not a public speaker. I do want to do a TED Talk one day.
Hey, but in the future, it's coming.
Exactly, but for now, it's more again exploring stories in a different way. Yeah, and I think that you're right. It could evolve into a more vocal or verbal way of doing that outside. That's not fiction based because I do acting. I love that, but as far as standing in front of folks and being able to keynote or whatever the case may be, I think that's down the line. I really am open to it.
Yeah. You made some references to music and sports being such influential factors in your upbringing, and I think that has direct ties into what you do now professionally, where you're writing so much for sports networks. What did that look like, and what were some of those influences in early age whenever you were starting to get involved with more sports or more musical elements?
So I'll take music first.
Sure.
So again, I probably might have been between 5 and 7, maybe let's just say 6, that, I'm like, I want to do something with music, with my hands on. And I played a few instruments just to toy around with, probably had a toy guitar or something, but it was, DJing and creating music and kind of doing that kind of thing. And fast forward, because I'm again not remembering all the stories to it, but music just playing such a big influence. And fast forward to, maybe 12 years ago now, a good friend of mine who I met doing just a random gig job it was going to be a social media startup for, I think, like the hip hop industry. I don't even remember the name of it.
Nice.
It was a startup in this area. I don't think it really went anywhere, but I was at the time looking for a gig, and I met this really cool musician there. And, you talk to people, and he knew that he had learned that I was into radio. I had done some stuff on the radio, and I had written, because again, I write everything. So I had written a business plan for a record company. It was a part of what was going to be my eventual conglomerate at some point in life. So I was like, the person I looked up to the most throughout like high school and college was Sir Richard Branson.
Yeah.
Like the Virgin guy.
Yeah, that's a fascinating, inspirational figure. Really.
It was him and Oprah. And it was just like between the two of them, it's like, if I can mix with the two of those people, dude, like that is really the definition of how I saw my life,
that's a
unfolding.
powerful combo right there.
Yeah. Because Oprah, she's, I'll come back to Richard in a minute, but if you think about Oprah, people forget she's a phenomenal actor. And I was an actress, I've acted in plenty of things even more recently. Yeah. I don't talk about it a lot, but I do it. I do it quite often.
Yeah.
But she's a phenomenal actress. She's an orator. She's just spiritually grounded in ways that, she's just someone who I truly look at. And my mom, when she sees her, she's like, there go your godmother. She calls her my godmother because I call her my godmom. But Richard Branson and Sir Richard Branson and Oprah were like the two people who I would say, even early on, I'm like, those two people are doing what I wanted to do. So when the friend asked me about, he comes to me and he's like, look, I know you have this business plan on your computer for a record company, because I told him about it. Had a 35-page business plan, like a serious business plan.
Wow.
I would go to the Maryland Business Association to get help because they had like free classes, and I would go.
Yeah, resources for people starting businesses, right?
Yes, all the way out of Annapolis. I would drive out there and just learn.
It's a hike, yeah.
It is a hike. I used to drive a lot more than I do now. You can't get me to drive anywhere now. But I would go out there and get tips to put this business plan together, and thought about like raising money. I had financial, everything was there. And he said, I'm going to put out my first album. I put together the songs and everything. I have like 20 songs. I'm going to cut it down to maybe 12. Can you help me with it? And I thought about it. I was like, let me hear the music first. I want to commit to something.
Right, before you know what's up.
Right. Let me hear the music. I listened to it. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, there's a few things, you could tighten up with the mix and all of that. But I said, if I help you with this music, I'm gonna have to actually really legit start my record company.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna have to file LLC because I have to file LLC forms.
Yeah, a lot of steps involved.
It's a few steps. I'm like, I'm gonna have to do this for real. I'm like, are you for real that you want to do this? You're not just like a fly by night. You want to rap today, tomorrow you're a chef. You know what I mean? You know how people are. And he's like, no, this is my thing. Like this is what I do. I produce for, because he's a producer too. He's like, I want to produce for other people. He's a songwriter and all that. And I was like, okay, well we can do this, just the two of us. Yeah. Because we didn't have any money to like hire anybody else. Right. We don't know if anyone else is serious. So cut to maybe a few months later, he starts getting, gigs and things like that. And I'm helping out with more, I think it's right side of the brain stuff because I'm more artistic, but I started doing like businessy stuff.
Yeah. That's hard for a creative too.
It is super hard.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
why I don't have a record company today.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, that is, when you think about our language, I said, I want a record company. I want to own a record company. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize I didn't want to run a record company.
Right.
Big difference.
Different animal.
I want to own a restaurant. I don't want to be a chef. I don't want to cook in a restaurant. You know what I mean? So I didn't realize then that there was that difference. But that experience and looking back was an incredible experience, right? Because I'm doing all of this stuff to help him get shows and all of that. I got into directing because I wrote the treatment for his first music video and then ended up directing it. So then ended up directing more videos and kind of got that bug where I learned how to direct through my friend's music. But I was instrumental because it was just really just us, and we would maybe bring on a couple of more people for things to help us out. But I was instrumental in helping him secure performances all over Australia, all over Africa, all over Europe.
Oh my gosh.
All over the States and Canada. I think he didn't perform in South America. I don't remember that one, or Antarctica, obviously, but he performed on pretty much every continent.
Jeez.
And it was like all the money that came in, we would put it back into the company, so we were super struggling artists. And that story, meanwhile, that time I'm a single straight woman navigating Washington, D.C., which most people don't know is statistically, and I'll say one of, because I used to say it is because it was the worst city in this country for single straight women, regardless of race, statistically.
Wow.
That was back then. It was probably 2012 or something like that. But today it is arguably, and I don't know because I haven't studied the statistics, but I think it still is among the worst cities statistically for that demographic. But if you think about that, as me always thinking about a story, that's Sex and the City meets Atlanta. Yeah. That is a half-an-hour series about a young millennial woman navigating the most political city in the world. Right. Running a record company a city that you don't think about record companies when you think about DC.
Not at all.
And you probably don't think too much about anything dealing with DC unless it's political. Right. But I set it here in DC, and it explores the indie underground music world while also exploring the dating scene. And it's called Of Music and Men. So like Of Mice and Men. Yep. Because nerd me reading the poem that has that stanza in it. It's, the best laid schemes of mice and men often go awry and leave us nothing but grief and pain for promised joy. And I was like, that's an interesting stanza. If you change mice to music for her, the best laid schemes and any plans you could put together when it deals with music or men will often go awry and leave a woman with nothing but grief and pain for promised joy, right? So that kind of made me create that world of music and men. And again, being in DC, screenwriting, I'm interning on Veep. I'm doing all these things to try to, I don't know what I was trying to do because I didn't necessarily say I need to move to Hollywood and be a screenwriter. I was just writing. It wasn't like I felt like I needed to be somewhere to do it. I just did it where I was. I'm thinking about that story and even writing business plans and pitch decks and all of that too of Music and Men. Yeah. I didn't really know how to make it. I knew I didn't want to do, I'd done YouTube, low budget, little things with friends, but I was like, this is not that. I feel like I got something special here. So I didn't want to do a disservice to it to try to, gather up people who don't have experience, who are probably bad actors and all of that, to just try to do it for the sake of putting it on YouTube. Right. So I said, I'm gonna hold on to this for a minute, but I'm going to do some other stuff around it. Yeah. So I turned it into a short film. And it won some competitions that actually were really great and helped me meet some people, a lot of good, cool people. Then I turned that short film into novellas. So, like a novel. So a short novel. So each episode was its own little book. Right. I wish I had one to show you. I don't think I brought any with me. I usually keep them in my purse, but I didn't bring my purse. But they're little 4x6 books that are about 15 to 18,000 words, which is, a normal book is over 90,000 words. Yeah. But they're little novellas that are essentially the episodes that you would read, like if you were, because normal people don't read screenplays.
Right.
But if I wanted to publish the story, and it is published, it's on Amazon.
Yeah.
It's called Thinking of a Master Plan. That's the pilot.
Oh, nice.
So the first episode.
We got to plug that. Make sure we put that in the link.
Right. Yeah. It's in book form.
Yeah.
But I do have, it's in book form, I do have the entire first 12 episode season. In book form, I have it written on my computer. So I have hundreds of thousands of words for the first season of this thing written. Ready to go as little books. So obviously they're episodes too.
Yeah.
And then back in, I think 2019, right before the pandemic, I started turning those novellas into a storytelling podcast.
Yeah.
So it's an elevated audiobook.
Yeah.
So it is just me reading, but it has, if the character's walking down the street, you're hearing traffic.
Yeah, you have some sound effects integrated in there.
It's a little elevated,
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's a little different experience from the typical, Audible audiobook where it's just the dry author reading or someone reading it. But yeah, so the music element had come full circle and turned into the record company, which turned into another full circle that kind of ended up being screenplay. Well, not just a screenplay, but a story in screenplay, podcast, novels,
all these
all of these
points.
different ways exactly of telling that story. And today it's, it still isn't the TV show. It's just not time for it yet, obviously. But that TV show or that pilot to the TV show has been getting me a lot of meetings. So folks are kind of receiving it, which is good.
Yeah.
So hopefully, it'll eventually soon become the scripted television show that it ought to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, sort of taking this in a new direction, the creative journey for so many people has a lot of ups and downs. And even before we started recording, we were speaking about the gentleman who was able to make it into Hollywood almost unscathed, it seemed like. It was a very interesting piece that I hope we'll dive into more here. But one of the things that you really struggled with was feeling like you didn't really control your own reality. And I think whenever you're in the creative space, that's very challenging because that can go down a dark road, right? You can feel very defeated in those moments, and understanding how you navigated out of that and onto your current path, which has been full of awesome opportunities. I'd like to explore that with you just a little bit more and understand, what did that do to you creatively, and how did you get yourself out of that funk, if you will?
Well, that's, I had this, what I like to call artistic ignorance for most of my life. As you saw, as you heard me talking about being an explorer as a kid and kind of just embracing every experience. And that was incredible.
Yeah.
And I would go fearlessly into any situation because I really felt like I could do it. Like that was my
world is your oyster, right?
Right. It wasn't my literal mantra, but thinking back, that was sort of the mantra, was like, I can do it.
Yeah.
And that's a great mantra for anyone. Granted, if you don't want to just jump out of a plane and say, I can fly. You don't want to be.
But that confidence is key.
That confidence,
creatively speaking.
But I think it was during the record company time. It was a lot of stuff going on during then because I had written another book. Not another book, but a book prior to turning the record company story into novellas. I written another book. It did not work out the way I wanted it to. I was unemployed at that time because I come off of, doing, what was I doing? I was doing like a radio. I was in the music industry in some way. And I'd written the book. It didn't work. Was doing the record company. It didn't, even though I pushed to the forefront the highs of doing the record company, which is getting him the shows. Yeah. There were a lot of lows in that experience because it wasn't really growing. And it wasn't really, he is a musician that is great person, great musician, but the situation wasn't growing at all. It's just a lot of stuff that went on at that time where it was a lot of struggle. It was just a lot of struggle.
Yeah.
And so I think I fell from being this kid who with this can-do attitude to remembering every single failure. Every time something failed or didn't work, or I took out a loan to publish a book and then I couldn't pay back the loan because the book didn't sell based on the marketing plan. Right. All of these kinds of things just did not work. So when you have those experiences and they're repeated, you keep having them. You don't, and at the time, if you don't know anything about mindset and all that kind of stuff, and you keep thinking about those experiences,
dark place.
It puts you in a dark place, but then it also, you don't really know how to get out, because we all can face dark, situations. And then, if you have the training, or if you know how to not fall into it and stay into it, is a different story. But I, through a big chunk of that, I couldn't figure out how to get out of that. And it felt like it manifested in a lot of other areas. And I'm talking about just career. That's the stuff we're just talking about.
Yeah.
But if I think that negative mindset of remembering those failures, believing that everything will fail because something else did.
Yeah. It's like a domino effect almost.
So instead of having that can do or I can do it attitude, it started to become, I don't know. It was like, should you do this? I don't know now. Yeah. I don't know if I should dive into this situation because, well, I don't have the money. You know, it's a lot of don't and can't that's associated with it because you're so scared that something that happened before is going to repeat itself.
Exactly.
And even if it didn't happen before, some other kind of failure is going because that didn't work. So maybe this other thing won't work.
Got your own Murphy's Law going on. Something's going to go haywire.
Yeah. And that's what happened. And it just kept happening with everything. So no matter how much I would write, no matter how many other, I don't know, business situations I would get in, there was always in the back or maybe even in the front of my mind that it's not going to work.
Yeah.
It's like the other thing didn't work. This is not going to work.
Right.
And so that's how that happened, how that came to be. I believe it was around before the pandemic when I started doing more reading about, everything. It's more reading in general, but more reading about laws of the universe, for instance, meaning like law of attraction, law of it's a lot of laws, like 12 of them, but, started reading more about that almost casually, but kind of thinking it could be something to this.
Yeah. Did you go into that searching for an answer, or was it just something that sort of fell into your lap? It was just the right time, right place sort of situation? It was
both because I had been always searching.
Yeah.
I remember an event that happened, I believe maybe around college or after college, where someone asked me to go to church with them. Now, I grew up in a household where my grandmother went to church religiously. She was very pious. My mom didn't. She would still classify herself as Christian, but only because her mother was.
Right.
It wasn't because she had done all this exploration and decided, well, that's the one I'll choose.
Exactly.
It was no exploration. It was just everybody else is, so I am.
Go along with it almost.
But I couldn't do that, obviously.
Yeah.
Like, I would go maybe sometimes with both of my grandmothers, maternal and paternal grandmothers, and I just didn't get it.
Yeah.
I tried to force myself to get it, force myself to want it, but reality is I just truly had too many more questions that nobody was answering.
You and I share a lot on this topic. So
it was like, well, if nobody's answering it, I got to do some more research on this. And in doing the research, then you get exposed to things that make more sense to you, like Buddhism, like just other things that make more sense in the grand scheme of it all. And so that's, some of the things that I was doing with that.
Yeah.
Please pardon me. What was what brought about this question? Because I felt like I got tangential.
Well, it was more, I think going back just a little bit, but talking about how when you found yourself in that sort of rut where you were a little bit uncertain about the control of your own reality. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with. It's like you feel like you don't have any weight when it comes to the things that happen in your life. And in so many ways, even whenever you wrote this out for me, but during our conversation, it was a reclamation of control for what your life could be. Yeah. And I think that's sort of where that was going. And I
felt like I forgot. I was like, I don't want to keep talking in this lane if that's not what we were.
You're right on track. You're right on track.
Okay. So that's to get back to the whole stream of our thoughts.
Right.
It was right around then, the pandemic, and that's when I say then that a lot of that stuff came to a head where I had been doing sort of soft research, for more than half of my life, but just the circumstance of the timing of it all brought about a lot of questions where I felt like I had been, because I had just released or was planning to release the book version of Music and Men, something around then, or I had just released the book version of it and was still trying to figure out, had really no idea how I was going to market that. And it was a lot to it. I did as far as putting the book together, I did everything from the graphic design to the book layout, like literally everything. Top to bottom, because I didn't have the money to hire anybody.
No, you have to do that whenever you're doing it all in-house, essentially.
Right. So it took its time, but I had done all of that. And I think that was around the time I had just launched or was planning to launch the podcast to support it. So the storytelling podcast would be like I said, an elevated audio version.
Yeah.
So lose the job thing, the gig. And I'm just like, I start asking questions asking questions in general, not specifically like,
Yeah.
and not specifically because I think I had to ask God too. I'm like I'm asking everybody, like, what is going on here? But it really was questions like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
And part of the dogma that I mentioned before when we're dealing with, bring upbringings for everyone, not just me, but upbringings where you kind of have this built-in belief system. You can't not default to that sometimes, where you think in a negative and a positive way. Where when I mean defaulting to it is you are asking God to give you something. You are asking God to reward you if you're good.
Right.
And that's where those questions came from, because I was like, look, like I'm doing everything right. And I mean that literally, like as a human being, like this whole journey
checking
we're
all
on,
the boxes,
like checking all the good girl boxes, like just being a good person, being a quote unquote good girl, like all of those kinds of things. Why is it that I'm, of all people, not getting the rewards, not being able, because I'll still be good if I got the rewards, but I need to get them. Like where are they? Where's my money?
Coming back, right?
Where's my vacations? Like I've never been on a vacation. It was like those kinds of questions came up, and I don't even know how. Maybe the internet, as far as like marketing, I don't know how I stumbled upon Neil.
Some speaker was listening somewhere.
Yeah, maybe it was God, right? It could have been God. Yeah, I don't know. But conversations with God came into view for me. And it's such a phenomenal book, series of books, but speaking specifically about the first one, where Neil Donald Walsh was a man, I'm going to say maybe in his 50s when he had this conversation. And he writes the book as if it's a literal conversation, because I do believe we all have different experiences, and his experience was that he had a literal conversation with God. Yeah. And I listened to the audiobook while reading. I was like, I need to get this in every format. So I'm listening to it so I can go. I can pretty much know how much time I have, because if you're reading something, sometimes you can slow down if you're sleepy. You can read a little faster. I was like, if this audiobook says
it gives you the countdown
18 hours,
right there,
it's right there. I know how much time I got. So I'm reading the book while I'm listening to it. But the cool thing is, I didn't know going into the book is that he did this magnificent thing that I've always done in my mind, whereas the voice of God, the voice of the omniscient, is not masculine or feminine, but rather both. So some chapters or some parts of the book, when you hear it, it's reading as a male narrator, and then it will switch right in the middle of a thought. It was not even that like the male read the whole chapter and then the next chapter started. No, it'll be in the middle of a sentence.
Oh, that's so smart.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It switches to the feminine. It switches to a woman, and they both sound older and seasoned. So you feel like you're listening to someone you need to hear, right?
Oh, that's such a cool technique. Wow.
It's amazing. So that helped, because if I had just read the book, it would have been it probably would have been a male voice, maybe. I don't know. But it would have been in my head what the voice sounds like. So that's number one that caught me right off the bat. And I was like, that's amazing. Yeah. But the second thing that really caught my attention is that when he starts out the book, he's thinking the exact thing I was thinking at the time, which is, I'm good. Where are you? Right. Who's out there? Who's going to help me? I'm being everything that I need to be to get rewards. And it wasn't just the reward as far as stuff, but it was just non-struggle, like all of this stuff I'm going through at the time. It was just, everything felt like it was a fight, or it was you email or call people, you apply to jobs, no one answers, or you don't get the job. You email or call people that
it's incredibly defeating.
Everything was a defeat. Everything was a defeat. So like I said, even losing a job that I didn't want felt like a defeat. I'm like, I don't want this, but dang, I lost something. Yeah. You feel like you lost something, because whether you wanted it or not, a loss feels like a loss. So it was, one of those things where the book is just right there, when it was needed. And he didn't approach it necessarily from a religious standpoint. But again, when you have any religion that you come up in, like the artist that I work with was Muslim. So I was like fully immersed into Islam. Yeah. Like that was a part of, not that I was ever Muslim. I never converted but I went to a lot of their events and recognized a lot of their, I don't want to call them holidays. I don't think they really call their stuff that, but some of the things that they do, the rituals that I, embraced and was able to witness firsthand.
Yeah. A powerful experience, informative.
Super powerful. Yeah. Like I have so much respect for Islam, and it's just like, having that experience contributed to a lot of stuff too. But I grew up, again, the backdrop of my upbringing was Christianity. I don't know what denomination maybe Baptist. Let's just go with that. And I'm not trying to be dismissive, but I think it was right. There are many, and it was. My grandmother was Southern, so I'm just going to assume maybe it was Southern Baptist. I don't know. She passed away, so I can't ask her what the specificity was. But the point is, Neil Donald Walsh also had a semi-Christian. He had a Christian upbringing, but whether at the time he probably wasn't or didn't identify with Christianity necessarily. But of course, that is the seasoning of everything you know about God. So some of the questions that he asks, some of the experiences that he default to, kind of laying out for us, comes from that kind of Christian undertone. Right. It has Christian undertones to it. But the point is, that's what helped me really identify with the book. Yeah. And it was such an amazing, like I said, listening to it and hearing it, I've done that 3 times now because it was that influential because he starts out the book. And I think that's, the point that I was getting to with how he starts it out, which is he's reaching out and saying, why am I doing everything? Like if we line up everyone's sins, I'm pretty sure I have the least amount of them. Like, I'm not being flippant. Baseline there. Yeah. Right. I'm not trying to be flippant, but it's one of those things where if I'm joking about it and saying it in jest, but it's one of those things where it's some honesty to it. Like, and I'm being real. Like if you line up everybody's sins, I probably have the least amount of them. Yeah. And so where is my reward? Like, why am I suffering so much? And so the answers that he got, I'll leave that to everyone to read the book, but the answers that he got felt like they were comforting to me. Yeah. In that it's about so much more than that. Yeah. It's so much bigger than that, although it's so much smaller at the same time. It's not as complex as we think it is, even though it's very vast. Right. And again, I don't want to try to summarize what that experience encompasses. Like, I don't want to do that for anyone.
It's totally different for everyone.
It will be. Yeah. Because I've had a few friends that I've referred to that book and they were like, thank you. Like, there's been 2 people who have come back and said, I absolutely thank you for that. And then we've had our own conversations about it. But it helped so much at the time because if you think it was the pandemic and all of that is happening. So we're trapped inside. People are locking things down in certain places. Yep. A lot of places ain't lock anything down. But, we're being locked down for the most part of it. And I had this screenplay in my mind for quite a while. It had probably been a few years. Based on an experience that I had. Everything feels tangential. It feels like such a long story.
No, it's okay. That's the connectedness of it all.
Yeah, it does. Because I'm thinking about the screenplay and it's called Reaper. And it's I don't normally write procedurals, but I love watching them. And I was
you told me about this on the heels of the Linda Jefferson project. And it was just like, that is so good. I would love to see this on TV.
I always think about the various things that I love and how I can put me into something else that I love that I may not normally always write procedurals. That's not my default way. And when I say procedurals, that's kind of jargon. It's when, for folks that don't know, that's those TV shows that are pretty much anything on CBS. Yeah. Yep. But it's those TV shows that are usually medical, they're usually police procedurals, and they're usually law procedurals. Sometimes you have ones that fall outside of that, but it's usually any kind of occupation that goes with a procedure. Right. There's a procedure to doing law and medicine and police and law enforcement, because it could be FBI. That's a literal show called FBI. Yep. But it can be, any kind of those kinds of things. Yeah. I don't normally write them, but I absolutely love them. That's a guilty pleasure. I don't watch any reality shows. My guilty pleasure is straight up procedurals, right? Yeah. So rewind. Several years ago, I live in Washington, D.C., and there are some great things about this city. There's some things in Congress right now about the city that has to deal with violence and all of that. Yep. I live in a corner house in my neighborhood, and there was one day I'm sitting in the living room, ironically talking to that artist about some probably business or something, and there is a literal drive-by outside my house. Gosh. Yeah. And I mean, I'm on the corner, so it's 30 yards away, at least 20 yards away, but let's just say 30. And the bullet, about the size of a nickel in circumference, comes through a nickel. It's a pretty big bullet. So comes through my window. Plus. Yeah, comes through the window, misses my head by maybe 18 inches, maybe 12, maybe a foot.
Kayona, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it lands in the wall in my house. And my musician friend was on, he's like, get down, because he heard it. I mean, it was right there. Yeah. And I did, you kind of freeze. It's like, what do you do? But I'm dropping down. And when it all is over, you hear the cars are speeding. It had to be a gunfight or something. Yeah. I get up and I see the bullet lodged in the wall, and the police had to come and retrieve it because they pick up shells. They had to get that thing for evidence. But I started thinking right then, I was like, if it was my time to go, what would time, I watch a lot of TV. So would time have stopped, and would the Reaper have come in some way and had a conversation with me? Or like my mind went there. It didn't go about death. It went about like, what's the story behind this? And how could this be great?
That speaks to your creativity right there.
Like, why would your mind go there, the Reaper? But one of the things that happened immediately was, what would she be like?
There we go.
So already, character is a she.
A novum, yeah.
And so anyway, during the pandemic, I had already written down, this was a few years ago, but I had already written down all these little story elements, but I'd never really written the story. And that's unusual for me. Normally when I think of a story or when I think of a character, I can kind of shape the story in a matter of minutes or to days. It doesn't take years for me to... But this one, it had been years because I had written down what would she look like. And I wrote, her father would be this and that, and all of these kind of supernatural sci-fi world. Yeah. But then during the pandemic, I started truly thinking about what that would look like as a TV show. Yeah. Not just the story, the grand story, but the TV show, how it would be packaged. 6 acts, it's an hour long. Well, not acts, but well, they are acts, but not to get too technical, but just how it would be broken up for a TV show. And I started writing it, and I outlined it and wrote it probably within 10 days, the first one. And I'm speaking like throwing out numbers. Most people don't, it takes us various amounts of times to write whatever it is we're writing. But 10 days is not a super long time to come up with something and write it out. Yeah. Rewrote it a few times. So around May, I decided, now this was March, April that I wrote the first draft and did a few rewrites. Around May, I was like, well, I should probably just enter it into this free contest that I'm seeing. They keep emailing me about it. This is a really cool company called Roadmap Writers, right? Any screenwriter who has either already a screenwriter who isn't signed or, on a TV show or movie, if they aren't already signed and if they are even thinking about writing, be best if you already are a writer, but even if you're thinking about it, they have like courses and stuff like that. Super little plug for them because they're great. Yeah. But I entered it into this free competition that they have called the Diversity Initiative, where they're looking for like diverse writers who have like a different, experience with their storytelling, and it won. Oh my gosh. Won the whole thing. I was just like, wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah. And what it comes with is this scholarship into their creative writing, not creative writing, their career writers program, which helps writers do something I didn't even ever even thought about, which is pitching. Yeah. Like I said, I was always just writing the art. I didn't think about,
that's a big piece of it too. You got to sell it, right?
Hey, people have sold scripts they didn't write because they had a good pitch.
Yeah, there we go.
So forget about the writing. Let's go in and pitch. Like, that's so important. I'm going to sell you a story I haven't written just because I can pitch it well, right? But they teach you how to pitch. And so that kind of changed the game for me because it kind of showed how to talk about a story before I need to talk about it. Like once you write it, even if you haven't spoken to anyone about it, start thinking about some of the ways you can be trapped on you heard an elevator pitch, right? Be trapped on an elevator. You got 20 seconds, 10 seconds.
Got to get it done.
How can you spit that thing out and tell people about it? Yeah. And make them actually interested in it. And so it kind of taught a lot of those things. But
so what's the pitch on this?
Man, I ain't pitching Reaper, No, I was just kidding. But, well, part of the pitch to that is, forget about the elevator thing. You'll probably have a little bit more time than that. But it is, the Grim Reaper pretty much loses her ability to be a Grim Reaper. And then she has to she teams up with this private eye to help solve the most unsolvable cases in Washington, D.C. Of course, it takes place in Washington, D.C. Yeah. Backdrop is, most folks don't know that D.C. is low-key like a tech hub. It's one of the places where tech is growing. Yeah. So that's sort of the backdrop, in that someone is trying to eliminate death for humans. So we die in pretty much 3 different ways. There's trauma. You fall off a building. You can't get rid of that. If someone falls off a building, that's,
game over.
Game over. But the other 2 ways we're trying to figure out, which is aging and disease. We're trying to get, there are people in technology that's trying to get rid of that. But if you think about our main character, that's an existential threat to her.
Oh, hell yeah.
You're trying to get rid of death, and you're trying to get rid of me. So, it's a pretty cool I wanted to make it grounded, so it's not a whole bunch of flying angels and demons. It's not that kind of thing. It really is, like I like to pitch it as Lucifer meets Ghost Whisperer. Yeah. It's that kind of grounded, you're walking around, you look just like any of us, but you have a secret. So it's a really cool story. It was a horrible pitch, but that's just sort of what the story is about.
Yeah.
Because you kind of caught me off guard, even though I should be prepared for this. But I do talk, but just in talking about it, it's not that much of a formality to the pitching as, with roadmap and what they will teach you. But it is sort of having the confidence to talk about who you are, where you come from, where the story comes from, and why you're the one to tell it. And that backstory to being almost dead sort of sort of helps my cause a little bit. But yeah, and so that winning that competition, getting into that program, they then help writers by sending out your log line to people in the industry. Right. And meanwhile, it was the summer of 2020, so it was a lot of people that were like kind of helping other folks out because everyone was trapped at home. Right. So that script had gotten into the hands between Roadmap and just in general, got into the hands of quite a few people who wanted to hop on Zooms because they weren't on set. Yeah, they weren't on set. They weren't doing anything else because they were reading nobodies. And I'm saying that in jest still, but they were reading people that they would not normally read. Right. One of the people that they ended up sending the script to read the log line. She wanted the script. She read the script, write the script, and wanted to meet. So 3 little steps kind of got me in front of her, but she's a good friend of mine now. She works at, I ain't gonna say where she worked at, but at the time she worked at Showtime. So Showtime doesn't normally do procedurals in that sense, but she liked the writing. So she wanted to meet the writer. And we hit it off, and she, like I said, became a pretty cool friend. A resource that I always, I won't even say a resource, a friend. So I reach out to her and we give her updates and stuff. So that was around September of 2020. So that whole summer was kind of doing that grind. And it was January of 2021 when she was the person. And I remember that vividly because I live in DC and this was the first week. And if we all remember January 6th, it was a very memorable day for for Americans. Yes. And so I live not far from the Capitol. So I was in the house watching this debacle on TV. Yep. And that same week, which was probably the 8th or something like that, she reaches out via email and says, "Do you happen to like sports?" So I'm like, I said,
in fact,
I probably like sports. This is my response. I said, I probably like sports more than anyone you've ever met in your life who's never worked in the sports industry. Wow. Because it is, like they say, football is life on Ted Lasso. Sports is life for me. Like, there we go. That competition, that's part of the human experience for me. That is the definition of the human experience. So she says, well, some friends of mine over at CBS are looking for a writer to help them out with the Super Bowl. Would you be interested? Boom. I'm like, who wouldn't be interested? Even if I didn't like sports, I'd be interested. This is the Super Bowl, heck right? Yeah. This is like, World Cup. Grail. The opposite, not the opposite, but sort of the equivalent of World Cup. So she sends my info over to the folks at CBS, and next thing you know, and I do mean the next thing you know, they were like, "You're hired. You're perfect for what we're doing, what we want to do." Yeah. And that ended up being a 2-parter because I worked on the Super Bowl with them on 2 pieces. Yeah. One of them featured Viola Davis, and the other one featured Jennifer Hudson. Yep. 2 EGOTs. Big names. And the one with Jennifer Hudson won my first Emmy. So
yeah, in case we didn't note that, we'll make sure to do that in the intro. Emmy award-winning writer.
Yeah, so it was just like, so I don't even know what to call it, like right place, right time. It wasn't a right place, right time. Yeah. It was just, that was just a perfect experience that used my own experiences. And I didn't even talk about sports experiences. Yeah, right. I talked about the music ones, but didn't talk about the sports ones. I can talk about the sports ones if you want me to.
Well, I want to get into that with you, but I think the one really fascinating element of this component of the story is that simply by asking questions, having the courage to reach out via email and make yourself an introduction, doors opened. And I think that that's a fear that so many people have when it comes to pursuing their own dreams, is the fear of rejection or the fear of the unknown. And, I'm sure you've dealt with that at many different points in your life, but you overcame those certain things just to take a little action. And it was the catalyst for this whole wave of new events in your life. And I was hoping you could speak more about that, because that's an inspiring message for so many people out there who are on that teetering edge of, maybe I should do this. Maybe I will send that email. I mean, what do you say to those people who are questioning that action?
Well, I think with the Conversations with God book and with that exposed, and then studying other thought leaders during that time to keep my mindset where it needed to be. That's what I took away from the Conversations with God book. Yeah, is that there's a lot that comes with mindset that we can control. Some people have chemical imbalances and it's a little bit more of a struggle for them. But for the most part, most of us just don't know how to control the thoughts that go through our head. We don't take the time to do meditation and focus on that. We don't take the time to just quiet our minds, go for a walk. Don't go for a walk, sit down somewhere, just get off social media. We really just don't take the time to do it. Yeah. And then we keep saying we can't. And then of course, if you keep saying you can't,
there's an element of discipline in there too. I mean, it's sort of easy to fall into routines that may be less than healthy for us, or it's a routine that maybe is not going to grow us in a direction of positivity at the rate we would like. But having some discipline and implementing those tools,
it's a daily thing. Wake up, make my bed.
Yep.
Put the cold water on. I do like super ice cold because I can't do the cold.
Hey, there
I
we
can't
go,
do the
cold
ice
water.
bath. Yeah,
All
but I
right.
have to do for the past few years. I've been doing ice cold water on at least my face every day. That wakes me up better than coffee. And I love my coffee.
Hitting the back, man. Oh, that,
yes,
that's a tough one. But.
So do the cold thing, but it's the artistic ignorance that I talked about before of having. It's the ignorance we generally have as children. The artistic ignorance is. That kind of came back to me in 2020. It was, everything was, what the hell? Like, it used to be, how some people joke and say, well, it's not the end of the world if you do this. It could have been the end of the world. Like, we didn't know.
2020 was a wild time.
It was. You didn't know, and not that you ever really truly know, but at that time, it was way more uncertainty. Yeah. And so it really was a lot of just shoot your shot type of moments. Yeah. And that came at the perfect time for me because, again, reading that book kind of gave me the knowledge about mindset and all that kind of stuff. And I was doing a lot of other studying then about mindset and everything on a daily basis. And so it was like, send that email, call that person, do that thing, and just see what happens. Whereas let's just say January on back to a good chunk of my life where there was this fear in that, they won't answer. It won't, I don't want, I'll be embarrassed if I send this email and they don't answer. Like, really? So it was exactly. I feel like a kid again. I feel like the way that I did as a kid, there was a huge chunk in the middle where I felt so much fear and everything. Yeah. I feel like I'm back to being like, it's awakening. I feel like I'm back to being me now.
Right. It's a good feeling.
It is, because naturally I'm a very optimistic person, but I feel like there was a lot of cynicism and pessimism during the time where it was like where the failure exacerbated that. The failure was just like, it wasn't a literal voice saying you can't, but I felt like I was telling myself that.
And like you said, it seeps into other parts of your life. It's hard to compartmentalize that sort of toxicity of the mind. It is like, how are you going to manage other elements of your life positively if that's how you feel day in and day out?
Exactly. So. And it's, not to be too on the nose, but it felt like a record that was literally continuing to play the same record over and over.
Little skip.
And so maybe change the record, maybe cut the music off, for a while. Sometimes every morning, I do my meditation. I got to cut the music off, the figurative music. So it's just like, I feel like I got back during that time to the child ignorance, that artistic ignorance of being able to just ask for something or ask to meet someone. I've met so many, especially even just in 2022. Yeah. I've met so many people. I have met at least 3 people. There are 3 people that come to mind that I consider mentors now. Mm-hmm. And these are people super high up. Yeah. Right. Who I met them all through a blind email. Yep. A simple blind email. I'm talking presidents of companies, vice presidents of huge sports companies. I'm thinking like people who are way, way, way above my pay grade. And I'm like, I would write them a very nice letter and say, who I am and what of theirs that I liked and that I saw that inspired me to do something or whatever the case may be. And these people were gracious enough to jump on, Zoom has become the thing now. Like that is still my main method.
Yeah, me too. It's so effective. I got the setup over there and it's like, if there's a gig or something that is out in the ether that I think I have a shot at, I'm sending you an introduction video. Wow. Saying hello.
That's dope.
Yeah. So I mean, again, why not? Why not?
Exactly. And these are now people I can call, for advice on anything. Yeah. I mean, and I have, and they've given me advice like, ask for this much money. You always want people to tell you that.
Wow. That is,
like this is how much you ask for because I did that and this is how much, and they would tell me straight up, this is how much I made. And so you should ask for this, or whatever the case may be.
That's fascinating.
These are fascinating people in incredible positions of power who I now have as mentors. And it was because I just was like, I'm just going to send an email or make a phone call.
And that knowledge is gold.
It is.
That knowledge is gold.
It is. Yeah. So, yeah. I think I answered that.
Oh, you did. You did. And I want to piggyback off that, because one of the things that you mentioned in here, which is, again, I say this a lot, but this was such a profound statement. It was really, really, it's shifted the way that I've thought about this phrase in the past. But you say, I'll believe it when I see it. Flip that. I'll see it when I believe it. You know, empowering yourself and giving yourself the ability to say, you know, I'm going to make this happen. It is within my control to shape my reality. I'd love you to speak more on it. It's just such a good statement.
That comes from, I never take credit for things, and I'm sure this person will give credit somewhere else, because that's just how great sayings go. We don't really know where they came from.
Unknown,
where they originated.
-unknown.
Exactly. But I got that statement because even to this day, at least 5 days a week. So usually during the week, I wake up and I listen to Abraham Hicks. Abraham Hicks is a spiritual guide in just in the spiritual world. Like if you Google Abraham Hicks on YouTube, you're going to get a ton of animated videos. And the reason is because I'm sure they probably couldn't clear the conferences, get the clearance to show the real people, which I think is a smart thing to do. But those videos are parts of those conferences are cut up into about 14 to 16, maybe 20-minute video clips, highlighting different questions from people in the audience. And it's phenomenal. Just imagine like a Tony Robbins or a Joe. Yeah.
One of their seminar kind of things.
Right. And it's clipped up. And they said that. And the reason why I'm using gendered terminology is because Esther Hicks is the woman who embodies Abraham, and Abraham is a manifestation of a spiritual side of a person. So she speaks from a very different place than most people, I believe, come from. And most people may not be able to embrace or understand. You probably have to get to a different level in your openness to hearing that, to truly be able to receive it. So I'm not telling people that you need to go and listen to that because you may not be ready, or it just may not be for you.
Yeah.
But for me, it came along at the perfect time because it was it was answering some of the questions. And sometimes we have answers to questions. We have our own answers, things that work for us, but we're afraid to embrace it because it may not be, you don't see anyone else doing this. So it's like, I couldn't look around and see my friends doing, approaching spirituality in this way. So it was like, I can't lean on that. Definitely not my family.
Right.
So it's sort of like there's this uncertainty to how you approach that kind of thought. But to say, most people say, well, I'll believe it when I see it. Meaning there's no belief, like there's almost disbelief now. But when someone, maybe the universe, God, whatever, when they show me this new car, then I'll believe that this new car exists. Yeah. But Abraham, from what I learned, would flip that and say, start believing. Then you'll see it.
Yeah.
Don't wait to see the physical first and then say, well, now I believe that you can be now I believe that you can work on the Super Bowl because, I saw it first. I'm like, no, I will not lie and say that I was thinking about the Super Bowl, but I will say that when the friend of mine email, because it was an email, and mentioned the Super Bowl, I was back to that can-do it. I can do that.
Yeah,
I've never worked on the Super Bowl. I've never worked on anything that big, but I can do it.
I'll prove it.
I believed it first. As soon as that seed was planted, she planted that seed on a Friday night. Let me tell you, this was Friday, January the 8th. By Sunday, January the 10th, they called me and said, you're hired.
Oh,
I'm talking about 2 days.
Yeah, that's so exciting.
She planted that seed on Friday that there was a possibility. And they didn't even have Viola Davis at the time. I mean, this thing moved super fast. And I was working with one of probably the absolute best person in the industry named, I'll name his name because he's one of my mentors. Yeah. His name is Pete. But I'll just leave it at his name is Pete. Yeah, he works for CBS. Everybody knows Pete.
I got you.
But he just, the mind, just like being able to be in the same Zoom room, because we're in a physical room, but just to be able to work with somebody and to see how their mind works and take so much away from that. But even before that, he was one of the 4 people who, and my good friend now, Ellis, he was one of the people who interviewed me, and considered me for this thing. And I'm like, I wasn't a rookie writer, and they knew that much, but to their world, I was a rookie because I didn't come from their world of, writing on specifically for the things that they do. But they were like, we believe you love this. We can see that. I had my Tom Brady jersey on because that's my dude. That's number 12.
TB12.
That's where the 12 comes from, right?
Episode 12, TB12. That's
what,
all
yeah.
coming together.
And they made sure, I had the Tom Brady shirt on and everything, and we talked about that because they joked, because Pete's a Jets fan of all things. But
interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, so they joked with me about that. But the conversation lasted very long. It was probably it was a long conversation, but it was with those producers, and they believed in me, and that's what it takes for someone to believe in you. But before they believed, somebody else had to believe first. And that was when she planted that seed. I believed, I don't care how big, this could be Super Bowl, World Cup. I believe I could do it. And I believed I could do it. And like I said, by two days later, it feels like when I tell that story, people are like, that was an overnight success. Like, didn't you just hear me telling you I was struggling and depressed for like 10
right?
years? But it was 10 years and then the sort of a big bang to it. Yeah. And then that's when they were, in our conversations, they were like, who would you want to do this? And I'm like, well, I might as well aim for the moon.
Yeah.
I'm Viola Davis. Let's just see if she'd be interested. Viola Davis said, yeah. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, that was my dream. That was a dream to work with Viola Davis. Because it's like Viola Davis in my head at the time was like Viola Davis, Angela Bassett, Meryl Streep. Those are my, those are the folks I look at. And I'm like, that's some act. Look, they're not even acting. They acting. Like, you got to kind of get ghetto on it when you watch those women on TV or on movies.
They know what's up.
So, yeah. They do some special things. So that was one of them. That was what I would call a bucket list, was Viola Davis. And then, like I said, the Game Open we worked on. But yeah, it was an incredible experience that came about because believing it first, then I saw it manifest after the belief came. I don't know if this would have worked out the same way if I was skeptical or unsure. I remember after I did the interview that Saturday, because they reached out Saturday morning. Saturday night I did the interview. I remember vividly thinking, you interview well. Like, speaking to myself in the second person, I was like, you do meetings well. Like, I think this is gonna work. I believe this will work out. It was like I felt like that conversation was being had. That I believed it. I was like, I believe this is something for me. It feels too perfect. Of somebody who wakes up and outside of the spiritual thinking, when I'm moving around and making coffee and getting ready for my day, I'm listening to sports talk radio and sports. Like, sports has always been a part of my life. You're
constantly preparing. And I think that confidence and that belief, that manifests in the way we carry ourselves, the way that we speak, our micro expressions facially. It has ways of affecting the way we operate as human beings in very subtle ways where I don't even think we know it a lot of times. Hey everybody, sorry to interrupt, but I just wanted to say thanks again for your viewership on the Wealth of Self. If you're enjoying this content, please give this video a like, and don't forget to comment down below if parts of this conversation are really resonating with you, or maybe even somebody you know. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and you'll be among the first people notified whenever new content is released. Additionally, if you'd like to support the Wealth of Self's mission, there is a Patreon link down in the description where you can become a monthly supporter. Behind the stories, there are a lot of cameras and lights and audio equipment and everything that helps these videos come to life. It takes a lot to run all of that consistently, and your support makes sure that we can regularly release these stories. Finally, if you are a photographer, or maybe you're interested in video production and you'd like to learn more about the equipment that we are using to document these stories, you can check out the kit.co link also in the description. Any purchases that you make there will earn a small commission for us to keep on telling these stories. So without further ado, let's get back to the interview. You don't talk about it as a regret necessarily. But you do go into the details of sort of wishing that you had understood more about the laws of the universe. And you even mentioned attraction, law of attraction, all these different elements, sort of getting onto that path a little bit sooner, that may have helped combat some of the depressive thoughts and the defeats that came earlier, even though I think in some ways those probably helped shape your next steps as well. Go into that with us.
I didn't know, and most people probably don't know or don't think about, living it requires more work than I thought it did.
Dang it.
Now, some of the work we embrace, like we got to floss, like I floss my teeth every night. I brush them.
There we go.
I take a shower. Some things you've embraced, that's just part of life. It's part of the maintenance. what I never thought was that mental maintenance was a thing. I just didn't.
A lot of people don't, I think.
Yeah, I just thought, you wake up, and if it's a rainy day, well, then you say, and again, what you say and believe, you get, oh, it's going to be a bad day.
Guess what?
And it's a bad day. And so I didn't know that then. I didn't know that there was mental maintenance. Like you wake up and you maybe spend a few minutes, 5 minutes. It's not a lot of time. You spend some minutes, doing some breathing, doing some meditation, just kind of doing some prayer, whatever it is that you do, just take some time to have nothing in your mind, because the day will bring enough stuff.
Yes.
Just kind of spend some time and it's the morning for me is the best. And I've heard that it is better in the morning before the whole day. Trying to do it at the end of the day is kind of hard.
Hey, if you stay up late enough, it's the same thing. No, I'm kidding.
You know
That's
what?
not a good
I'm
thing.
a night owl, so don't tell me that. I'm up to... Man, I'm up too late sometime, and I keep saying that I'm going to go to work early. I go to bed. I say go to work earlier. I'm going to go to bed earlier, but I just don't get to it.
Yeah.
But I just didn't know, throughout most of my life, probably up until like the pandemic, which is a long time to be sitting up there thinking like you just wake up, you worry about the physical maintenance, but you don't do any mental maintenance.
Right.
So I just didn't know it was that much work. And it's not, and I make it sound bad. It's not bad, because I don't mind taking a shower or washing dishes or just sort of the maintenance that comes along with life. But I just didn't know. And so because I didn't know, it was not that I thought that I would avoid negative experiences, but I would have interpreted negative experiences differently. So that's the difference. So it's one thing to have, something that we quote unquote call bad happen to us. And I use those air quotes because what's bad to me may be fine to you, and it may be good to her. Or, you know what I mean? Like we determine whether it's called good, bad, or indifferent,
Different
and
for
that's
all
again,
of us.
part of that mental record or part of that mental mentality of like how we define things and how we control our own reality based on how we define them. But I didn't know any of that. And so when things would happen, it felt like it was snowball, because me not knowing, it was sort of me putting in motion negative things, negativity and negative things.
And you didn't even maybe recognize
Didn't
it,
at
that
all.
you were doing that. So.
I didn't recognize I was doing it, and I didn't recognize that because I was doing it, these were the consequences or sort of the actions that happened after I would do something, or even think and feel something. Because thinking and feeling, we throw it away. Oh, feelings are just, no, those mean something. You have them for a reason.
Yeah.
You should listen to them. Like, not every feeling that you have, because sometimes you have to think about where they come from.
Right.
But sometimes you can have, if you're walking down a dark alley and you feel something, fear or something like that, then that's telling you, you have that for a reason.
Right.
So it's just like, it was so much I just didn't know. And so that led to, like I said, that valley, so to speak, of experiences. And again, those experiences could have been the same experiences, but not feel like a valley had my mindset been where it is, today, where you can recover a little bit faster. And understand, like I've had quite a few things, not quite a few, but not to be dramatic, but I've had some things happen more recently where it could have been like an implosion, but and this is not like forcing it, my natural, like where I default to now is it'll work itself out. And it really is a shrug, and it's sort of the whole body language thing where it's like, because at this point I've become the type of person that understands when I can control something and when I just can't. Right. And sometimes it's like, you can do all you can do, and the universe is going to be what it is. If you go out in outer space, there's meteors and there's all this stuff flying around. It's chaos.
Yep.
It's organized. It feels disorganized, but it's organized chaos out there. So that's what's kind of happening in life. There are cars driving by. There are birds flying. It's just, the universe is just being the universe. And a lot of that you can't control. Right. And so if something happens that, if you've done everything that you can do leading up to it, maybe do I don't know. Every situation is different, and I'm thinking about something very specific. Yeah. But at a certain point, you just have to say, it'll work itself out. Yep. And I did that more specifically to give you an example. We had a situation where we were going to go to Ohio. And it looked like Toledo. Financially, you and I were recording. We'll talk about that. We're doing a project where we had to go to Toledo, Ohio, to interview a legend, like a literal sports legend. The GOAT. We had to interview a literal sports legend. And like leading up to that, it was just things were happening where financially it wasn't coming together. Yeah. And then I can't help that. Like if it, like I set up the project, if it was meant to be, it's sort of like one of those things where I've done everything I could do. Yeah. And I really had to say, and I felt calm. Like, I wear this thing and it checks your pulse and all of that. It didn't go up. My heart rate didn't increase. I slept well, I was like, I was nervous some days at some points, but I was able to breathe and go, it'll work itself out.
Yeah.
And it literally worked itself out.
Yeah.
Like, it's, financially, as an example, the business credit card that I use just sent me a letter. We tripled your rating. Not your rating, your limit. We tripled your credit limit. Just tripled it.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Casual.
So that'll help. Yeah. For this, it's a business,
right.
A business thing. And then it was, someone who I had done something for a year before. I forgot all about it. Had done just randomly sent the money that I was owed. 18 months ago, I was owed this money. And I wasn't thinking about it because I've been living 18 months without the money.
Yeah.
It just showed up one day in my bank account. I had to literally research who this money came from. Like, where did this money come from? There's a random deposit in an account that I very seldom use, which was what kind of struck me, because I don't use that account normally. So to get a ping on your phone that there's been a deposit, it's like, wait, there's been a deposit? And during the pandemic, everything was a debit. They're like, we took this out of here.
Right.
But no, this was, just a deposit. It was quite a few things. And this was after things were looking bleak because the holidays were coming up, and it was like people seldom work during the holidays. Maybe they show up to work, but they're not working.
2 weeks before Christmas, game over. You're not getting
and that's
anything.
What it was. And I was, I got a little nervous, but then I had to kind of, like I said, pull back and go, it'll work itself out. I didn't want to disappoint, the people in Ohio. I wanted to stick to the schedule. I told them that because that's how I work. I like to stick to my word. That's all I have had my entire life was my word. I ain't no money for anybody.
Yeah.
So when I told somebody something, I have to stick to that.
Stand up for it.
Yeah. Yep. And so I didn't want to go back on my word, change the schedule. And I know in filmmaking schedules change, but mine wasn't. I was like, we going to Ohio.
And you did a fantastic job. All the correspondence leading up to that. I mean, you were calm.
You didn't know there was no money.
Oh, I had no idea.
Because it was just like, I just said, it'll work itself out. And it literally worked itself out. Yeah. It worked itself out. Yeah. And it was something as silly as the credit card thing. And then the, one of the things, this is so like spot on, like kind of arbitrary. It was like the hotel that I wanted to stay at, that we stayed at, was right by, like 2 or 3 blocks or whatever from the location. And this spot. Is an older person, right? Like, I want to stay at that hotel. The credit card, after they tripled the limit, they had these little rewards. Yeah. And one of the rewards was a discount off that hotel.
Oh, nice.
That hotel of all hotels.
Yeah.
So it was just like, all of these kind of really interesting things. Yeah. When I was able to just...
Universe is working for you.
It'll work itself out, because that's the record that plays now. It's not a record of, what am I going to do? Oh, I got to find this. I got to figure this out. It wasn't that kind of panic. Yep. And that's the way it used to be, because I didn't know, that there was any kind of control of it will work itself out. Was not, I'm saying it with a shrug, but it really was me telling the universe, work itself out. Work yourself out. That's
incredibly powerful. And that calm approach and that demeanor, I think it pays dividends. It helps whenever you have a situation that's a little tense, calm under pressure. Yeah. Great results. Yeah. And that's a good segue point into what we were doing in Ohio, if we can talk about it a little bit, but also your upcoming work, because it just seems like the professional trajectory for you right now looks kind of like this.
I welcome that.
Maybe, it's way up, and it's awesome. I'm so proud and happy to know that that's the direction, because you're so talented, and I just think it's going to keep on going. So.
So we were in Ohio, and again, everything starts with a backstory. So
one day in Ohio.
Rewind back to 2 years ago. Right after the Super Bowl stuff in 2021, I was on Twitter, and this incredible sports journalist named Richard, I think it's Richard Deesh. He works for like the Atlantic or something like that. Anyway, he's an awesome dude. But he tweets out something about this book called Hail Mary. And I was like, Hail Mary, you know that as a football term. Yeah. So I look at it. Book hadn't come out yet, so I looked to see who's involved with this book. It's 2 journalists who wrote this book about the National Women's Football League, this entire league that took place in the 70s.
Yeah, something most people. Yeah, I mean, you're a sports guru, right? You don't know about it, so
never heard of it. Yeah. And so I was like, oh my goodness. So I just tweet back, and I don't even tweet a lot. I'm more so like one of those Twitter like what do you call it? Like, I don't want to say a stalker. I don't stalk anybody, but just kind of lurk. That's a good word. I lurk on Twitter. Kind of read it because I use it for like news and stuff.
Yeah.
So I tweet out, that sounds like it would make an incredible movie. I didn't even know anything about the book other than what it was, right? So Richard is just like, this journalist reaches out to the authors via Twitter and does an @ thing for me. He's like, this is an incredible screenwriter who works with like CBS Sports sometime, blah, 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 kind of bigging me up.
Yeah.
And he's like, you guys should connect. So by the end of the week, we were on a Zoom. I was on a Zoom call with the two writers.
Yeah.
The book wasn't coming out until probably 8 months from then, but they were able to get me an advanced copy of the book. Because I was like, look, I don't know how it will become a movie or TV show or whatever, but if it does, I want to be a part of it. And so they sent me the book and I read it, probably within like a week or something like that. Incredible book. So Hail Mary. I mean, really, I can't plug it enough. It's a phenomenal book. But in the book, it's about the entire league. In the book, one of the storylines is about this football team called the Toledo Troopers. Right? The Toledo Troopers were recognized back in the 70s by the NFL as the winningest pro football team of all time. We think it's the Miami Dolphins 75, right?
Sorry.
But it's not. And the Hall of Fame recognized this group. They won 6 years straight. Undefeated.
Yeah.
And then you kind of go a little bit more micro, starting really macro, go a little bit more micro. The sort of, not to blend sports, but the Michael Jordan of that team was this woman named Linda Jefferson. And Ms. Linda, LJ. So that's why we were in Ohio. Last year, I pitched a story about LJ, about Linda Jefferson, to the NFL. I got the chance to meet and talk with some folks there, and I had some story ideas, and they were listening. So they reached back out and was like, that sounds like a good story. Would you be interested in doing it? And I'm like, come on now. You got to ask me if I would be interested in doing it. I told you about this. Yes, I'll be interested in doing it. So they are incredible. I mean, two women at the top that's just like running things. One of them has DC. She's not from DC, but she has DC ties. I think she went to AU, American University, I believe. I don't want to misspeak, but just phenomenal. Professional. I mean, just phenomenal women. And they wanted to tell this Linda Jefferson story, and I could not be more honored to be the one to tell it, right? So that's where that came up. And so you and I had spoken prior to, this, and you telling me all of the stuff that you're doing. So I was like, look, I have a chance to do something where I'm at the helm and hey, let's work together on this. Let's give you a chance to branch out from some of the stuff that you were traditionally doing, some of the stuff you've been doing. It's somewhat in the same realm in that it's kind of interview based, but the platform on which this will be seen is a lot different. Yeah, what were you about to say?
I was going to say it was an honor to be able to have that conversation with you and be considered. And I still think about it, and I'm so appreciative of the opportunity. I just have to say that right here. And
yeah, man.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Miss Linda is an amazing person.
Yes.
Super funny, unexpectedly funny.
Yeah, she was great.
She was hilarious. Pulp. Don't give her orange juice with pulp in it. That I will never forget it. But we had the chance to go, I set the whole thing up for early January, and we were able to, January 2023, we were able to go to Toledo and interview this legend who is, I wasn't around in the 70s, so I didn't know she was on all these talk shows, all these competition shows, magazine covers, billboards.
Yeah.
I'm talking GMA, not to just speak, arbitrarily, but talking about Good Morning America. We're talking about Phil Donahue, Dinah Shore. The Superstars was this competition show that took place back then where all of the, they had a women and the men's version, and she was one of the women on the women's side. Yeah. Sort of like what's the show that they have now with the obstacle courses?
Oh, it's a Ninja Warrior.
I love Ninja Warrior.
Yeah.
The name slipped my mind, but I do watch it. But it was sort of like a little bit like that, a little bit more dialed back. But you would have Althea Gibson, a legend in tennis, like playing basketball and shooting hoops. It was a fun thing that they did back then. And they tried to rehash it later, but I don't know if it worked. But she was a part of that. So she was a part of all of these incredible things in this league that apparently was niche because not a lot of people knew about it, but these women who had written a book, these two journalists had written this book about that.
Yeah.
And so that's how we met, and that's how I met the journalist. But then that snowballed into what we've done, and I still, to this day, it hasn't become a TV show or a movie yet. But I will honestly admit that I'm on my side, constantly doing everything that I can.
Yeah.
And they probably like, I don't know what they think about that. Like, I bring it up in conversations when I meet with companies.
Right.
Like, look, this is something to consider. And this is something that I would love to be a part of.
I could see that on the big screen. I feel like it would be such a great story
It is a great
relay.
Story.
Yeah.
Up against the backdrop of women's liberation, there was Title IX.
Title IX at that time.
All of that, all that stuff is in the backdrop. There was certain expectations, even more so than today, when it comes to what women are, what makes a woman. And then these women go against the grain and become tackle football players.
Yep.
So they're hitting, they're moms, they're nurses, they're all of these things, but then they take it out on each other on that gridiron. So it is an incredible story.
Oh, that would come across so perfectly in a film. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's people constantly compared it to A League of Their Own. Obviously, the comparison is there, but I like to kind of push back and say, A League of Their Own is incredible TV show and a movie.
Yeah.
But football is inherently a different experience,
very much so,
than baseball.
Yeah.
And baseball translates differently on the screen, but I think football is an experience that is unmeasured, like it's incomparable.
It's more visceral.
Yeah,
it's really
it's contact.
Yeah.
And so to be able to see something like that play out, and then we've seen some good football movies, but to see it with women is a little different.
Yeah, very much so.
Because of the narrative that is even to this day.
Yeah.
That kind of is I don't even say in our shadow, but just that follows. It's a narrative that kind of hovers over women like an umbrella.
Yeah.
That we almost can't get from underneath, when it comes to what makes a woman a woman.
Right.
And that has branched out. And so to say that in the 70s, we're even talking about, I don't know for sure that there were any trans women there, but that's being a storyteller today, we can explore that through a fictional character that we may not be able to name, but we can explore that and what that meant then. Oh, I'm so hungry for that story. Like I want that, I feel like I feel like even me being joking, and I like to jokingly say my mom, in the way she raised me, she would have been the perfect mother for a kid who was part of the LGBTQ plus community, but she was left with a boring straight girl. I jokingly say that to people. They're like, "You're not boring." I'm like, you look at it on paper, I'm a boring straight woman. But even with that, it's the empathy and being able to want to tell stories from other people's experiences, and being aware enough and having the wisdom enough to bring them in to help tell their own story.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't even try to tell a trans person's story.
Yeah.
But I would say, hey, we have a trans person in this story. We're gonna do that.
Right.
Let's bring in someone to speak to this audience. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, when you're looking at what's next, even on the ride over, there were just like ideas popping left and right. So
about some stuff.
If you can give people an idea of where your mind is moving forward, what are the goals for 2023 and beyond? I mean, it's maybe hard to even think about all of it. And you even mentioned that it's like there are too many to even talk about, but
it is.
I think about my own goals, and it's sometimes hard to quantify them or package them in certain ways. And things just come out of the ether at times. Projects land in your lap that you hadn't anticipated, but they represent really good challenges and really good storytelling opportunities. But for yourself, what does it look like?
Well, in general, so speaking macro again, I, in general, want to use story, whether it's today or a million years from now in this experience, that I want to use story to kind of help people to kind of see this whole experience that we're in, being these spiritual beings on this journey of being a human, to kind of help make that a little bit more, I don't want to say easy, but maybe a little bit more or less complicated.
Yeah, confusing.
I think that's a good word to use, because I think we could kind of, there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of, the word should is one of those words that kind of, use it sparingly, because we can get into a point where we feel like we should do something. We're shitting all over ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We get into that. So I want to be...
That's a good quote right there.
Stop shitting all over ourselves. But we use should. I should do this. I should be this. I should think this, and so we start doing a lot of things based on should hovering over us. So for me, I want to, use story to kind of help people to understand, like, what your own personal journey here is yours alone.
Exactly.
There are some groups that you may fit in inherently, but then there's some groups that you might be choosing to be in that you don't really fit in.
Right.
But you feel like you should fit in them. And because for whatever, it could be fear, fear of the afterlife or fear of just something that you don't know. So I feel like I should be a part of this because it'll secure some other things when, other things in the future, whatever the case may be. But yeah, so it's like, it's hard to kind of truly say what I specifically want to do and how I specifically want to tell stories. I do know that I love TV, film, and the other as being a part of it. The other being the unscripted that I joked about. But it's still, alternative storytelling.
We're in such a good time now, though, too, for you to be in the position you're in and tell these stories in this way in a media-driven world. I mean, what better time to reach a big audience than right now? So it's kind of it's fascinating.
Yeah, and so I do want to use story in that way to help people. And so, like, for instance, there are a lot of things that come out that are I use the word like in the zeitgeist, like things that are just in, whether it's media just happening in the world to kind of help to structure like the backdrop of certain stories. And one of the things that I was telling you earlier was about, rugby kind of came into a really weird place in my life last year where I was searching I knew the story that I wanted to tell, but I was using, I didn't know what sport I wanted to use.
Right.
And I thought about all of the major ones, at least the 4 major ones. Well, let's say 5 with football, with soccer here in America, and thought about the pros and cons to each of them and eliminated all of them that I couldn't use as the vehicle to tell this other, because all of my stories are really at their core human stories.
Right.
Couldn't really make use of them for one reason or another. Baseball, again, a league of their own is out. Just didn't want to use baseball. Basketball is very overused. There's a million basketball stories. No matter which way you cut it, they're being in movies. Football just looks stupid if it's not the NFL. I don't care what you do. I don't care if it's not the NFL, if it's not an NFL game. If you have made honestly, if there's a movie about football, the football part of it looks stupid. The uniforms don't look right. Just the whole thing just does not translate. And I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it just yet. Some football movies have been better than others, but the actual football part of it just doesn't look right. And then, hockey has that cumbersome uniform like football where I didn't want that for this story. And then soccer, my favorite show right now is Ted Lasso.
Hey,
like
season 3 coming
up.
around.
So it's just
Getting
like
ready.
with Ted Lasso, I'm like, I'm not touching soccer because they've done that. I'm not even going to try to do it.
Yeah, they did it well. So
very well. And so, I was looking for another team sport that kind of gave me the opportunity to tell another story that I wanted to tell. So we mentioned earlier in this conversation, music and sports played a great, and I like to bring this full circle because I never touched on the sports part other than being a part of the Super Bowl. But as a kid growing up, I played a lot of sports, but when I never dreamed of being, was someone Dominique. I was gonna say Dominique Dawes. I didn't dream of being her. She's the first person. Shamika Holtzclaw. Like I'm trying to think of like women basketball players that I like, but I didn't dream of doing what they do.
Right.
I dreamed of owning a team. Not necessarily WNBA. It was WNBA, and I loved hockey when I was a kid. So I loved hockey when I was a kid, and so I dreamed of owning a hockey team. I was a huge football fan and still is. So I've always dreamed of being an owner.
That's an incredible dream. You think
I didn't think about that that as a kid, though.
Of course.
It was just, this is what I want. I would doodle all the time, and I would draw stadiums and say, this is a 70,000 person stadium, and it's located. And I had map. I used to be a map collector. I used to collect maps when I was little, and I would look on the map to see where something was, and I was like, well, this would be a good spot for a stadium. And so like I had like the plans together for these things.
Latitude and longitude right here.
Like I literally looked on the map and was like, my stadium would be, it was like this place out in Maryland. Don't even, it's so crazy. But so I was like, I wanted to own teams. And so again, last year I was putting together some thoughts for a new pilot, a new half an hour, kind of more drama than comedy, sort of like The Chef. I mean, The Chef, goodness. The Bear, they cook about The Chef. They call The Bear a comedy. It's not really that comedic, but it's a great show. But something sort of in the vein of that, but just obviously a different, I wanted you to feel like that, but just in a different industry.
Right.
And it centers on a woman who comes into sports ownership in a very unique way. And it's a phenomenal story. And using that, I was reading the trades earlier this year. And I'm going to be vague because everything is sort of still being ink drying type of thing. But reading the trades this year, another one of those situations happened. I'm always reaching out, whether it's Twitter. If you heard, everyone who I've met, it seems like in the last 3 years, I've met because, hey, let me just write this letter or tweet or whatever.
Right.
But I read about this filmmaker who had done a documentary about somebody in rugby, like college rugby or something. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Maybe I should send him an email congratulating him on this whole thing.
Yeah.
Just to congratulate him. And I wanted to kind of connect because of the rugby thing. I'm like, it's not that many people in America that's really even focused on it, let alone in sports.
Pretty underrepresented
in the writing, in the filmmaking space, right? That's telling stories that deal in that realm. So I reached out to him and we jumped on a Zoom, our thing, and we chatted for well over an hour. Just kind of riffing, just kind of talking about story, talking about some of the stuff he's working on and everything. Yeah. And that has just manifested into so much more that I can't even really talk about. But it just, again, it was exacerbated by a conversation about rugby and how that's such a cool sport. It's underrated. It should have more eyes on it. It's a really fun experience to watch. And we'll see if my pilot eventually becomes something, but then we'll also see, I'll be the first to let you know in any updates about telling stories, telling the story about rugby in general for America, but generally for the world, whether that, how that comes together soon. That kind of all comes back to what I'm working on now. There are all of these stories, funny enough, in my catalog, because I have a number of TV, number of pilots and TV shows that are sort of developed on my end, and a number of features, about 50-50. So right now I am working to set those things up, having like a ton of meetings and things to try to get some of this stuff into the right place. Yeah. And I'm also on my end, I've, finished probably about 4 weeks, about a month ago, finished writing the first draft to what I foresee to be my first feature because I've directed a ton of stuff, but I've never directed a feature film. Right. So this would be...
It's a big step.
It is. Yeah. It is. And it's written specifically with, not a ton of locations to be and that's funny that this came up too. I jumped on the phone with someone and I told them exactly what I'm telling you now. I just finished my feature that I'm doing some rewrites on, but it's a good story. It's about a music producer, a young female music producer who's 31 years old. She's, got her 9-to-5 that she hates. She wants to produce music. And it sort of kind of not explains, but kind of depicts what that is. And the best way I can describe it is we know what Kanye West does. And that's sort of like, it's a allegory about, he's not a character in the story, but allegorically it sort of shows how a person like that can influence younger people. And so she wants to do sort of the same thing that he does. And there's a lot of great music producers, but he's a popular person to use as an example. Yes. But creating music while you're not a musician, don't read music and don't have the same training as real musicians or real musicians, and how that art form in and of itself can be an art form. Yes. Like it doesn't look like it on paper because you don't know any of the things to make it an art form, but it is, and it's wonderful. And it's a really cool piece that has some magical realism in it. And it's, it's a soft drama, just about this woman's journey, this young woman's journey. And I was speaking to someone and I was like, yeah, this is going to be a low budget film. And for not to alarm anyone, low budget in the film industry is like under $5-6 million. Yeah. So that sounds like a lot to most people, $5 million. But I mentioned that to someone and they said, this is a producer, someone who's trying to do more producing. And I said, I'm gonna raise, this money. And he said, okay, I got you. Yeah. I was like, excuse me? I wasn't even asking.
Repeat yourself, please.
I said, I'm looking to do this movie on about 2, and I want to have, money for the marketing and all that. And the response was okay from someone who wants to finance movies. Yeah. So I believe it. I didn't necessarily specify. I wasn't specific in saying it needs to be this person. Yeah. But I told myself, I was like, I'm going to do my first feature. I'm going to do my first, and the part that I could control was writing it. Yep. I couldn't have that conversation with him if I never wrote the script. I could have, but it'd be silly. Right. But coming into it, I told him the script is 106 pages, nice little, I might shave off a few, but it's a nice lower end page wise count for a script. And I just told him, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm doing this year. I'm going to be raising money at some point this year. And his response was okay. So, okay. So there we are. So as far as what I can control in all of that story is that's the part I know that I'm going to be doing for the foreseeable futures. Right. tinkering away. I'm writing out summaries now. I've written out my log line. Like I'm doing all of the stuff I learned in Roadmap Writers to put together this story so that whenever I speak to people about it, I can speak more eloquently than I just did about it. That's what I can control.
Yeah.
I can't, it's some other stuff that I can't, but you know, those other things, whether I make this movie about this or make this TV show about these football players, whatever, I can't control that.
Right.
Yeah. I just put out there that I believe I'd be the perfect person to tell those stories. I think I do them justice and all that, but yeah.
That's a fascinating and exciting journey that you're embarking on with this, because to have the support of somebody in the industry, a producer of that magnitude who's willing to hop on board and be of assistance, again, just like the boost in confidence and the boost of that creative ignorance, if you will, but that's coming into reality. There's fruition to it at this point, and that's so powerful for your journey. But I wanted to sort of ask, looking back at this point, you see this journey and you're looking at yourself in the mirror and you've gone down this road. Who do you see at this point whenever you reflect on where you've been and where you are now?
I can honestly say, like, I am super happy now with the ignorance, like really pursuing life like a child.
Yeah.
It feels newer, even though I said I know when I was a child, I lived life like a child. I was given the permission parentally to be a child.
Yeah.
But that's how I feel like I've gotten back to that point.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, that's where I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the wealth of self is all about taking away little pieces of knowledge. And that could be from a victory, which you've had many, or defeats, which you've also had many. But if you were sharing that message with somebody listening or watching, what would it be? What would you tell them? What is that thread of wealth that you've taken away from all these experiences?
So like, how do I define it? So like with wealth, a lot of folks may initially think of something tangible, you know, that we can hold on to. But for me, it's understanding that control part, that mental control that again, throughout most of my life, I just didn't know we had. I didn't know we could, you could stump your toe and just not feel like it's the end of the world. You know, you can kind of say to yourself certain things or help yourself or force yourself to believe certain things. I don't want to say force, that sounds horrible, but you're not going to force this.
Guide
but
yourself.
You can kind of, thank you for helping me out with the words. Like sometimes you can have so many words in your head, you can't even think of them. But yeah, it kind of can guide you to, you know, believing certain things. So for me, when it comes to wealth, it's understanding that you can actually control your own reality. And that what that means is like truly controlling how you perceive things, because as I mentioned earlier, you can look at something and see it or have an experience and see it one way. The exact same experience I could have and see it a totally different way, see the totally different things in it, you know, and the examples are abundant in that. But when you get to a point, or at least for me, when I got to a point where I realized that I'm controlling my own reality, and it doesn't mean the exact specificity of things that I've gone through, but it's just how I perceive them and perceive that, whoa, I can do this. Like that ignorance that you can get back to, it's a good ignorance. Then we joked earlier about the limitlessness of it all, because you will feel limitless when you live that way, when you kind of feel, and it's not reckless abandon, but it's just this freedom.
Yes,
I think
very much.
I think that's probably a better word within all of those words to kind of sum it up. Like wealth is sort of like, that's freedom.
Absolutely.
It's like really truly living this experience, feeling free.
Yeah. And I think your words of wisdom about perspective and being able to see the world the way that you want it, you can make that happen. Yeah. I think each of us have that power, but having good mentors, having, you know, people you can look up to that have sort of shaped that path for you, and then starting to embody it and put it into action, incredibly powerful. So I'm so thankful that you were able to come in today and talk to me. I have absolutely loved getting to know you more and getting to actually work with you and interact with you in a creative space. You're powerful. You really are. And your words are powerful.
I received it. I don't even know if we made it, if this made it into the cut, but when I mentioned the Oprah and Richard Branson.
Yes.
So I'll say that again. That's sort of the goal. That is sort of the goal, is to again, not to walk in the footsteps of anyone or be exactly like anyone, but watching people who you truly admire what they're doing and the people that they're being. Generally speaking, we don't know any of these people we look at, but say, okay, and like I said, Sir Richard Branson and Oprah, some of the things that they've built, I'll at least say,
yes,
and the way that they've built things and presented it to us is truly admirable. So I hope to be able to be one of those kinds of thought leaders, and whether some people think it's provocative or not, but just to be a person that people can tune into and be able to see, whether it's through stories or my literal words here, or play a platform like this, is to be able to take something away from it that then sparks their own research, their own exploration, their own answers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's what the root of this is. It's just one story. It's just one anecdote. It's just one account. And the right person listening or watching can flip a switch and everything's different. So thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. I look forward to everything else that hopefully we have in store with one another. But I'm keeping an eye out for all of your upcoming work, and it's inspiring to say the very least.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in on this episode of The Wealth of Self. As always, your viewership is immensely appreciated. If you want to take it a step further, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you are among the first people to know when new content is released onto our channel. Additionally, this is all about hearing voices. If you have any questions, anything that really resonated with you during this episode, leave a comment down below. I'm very eager to hear your voices and your thoughts. Until next time, thanks for watching The Wealth of Self.